So before we proceed, there's one thing that I forgot to emphasize with respect to page 4 of our notes, and that is that all of this information right here is all about formatting. So when it comes to formatting, we are going to need some more space over here. So I would say maybe fold your paper in half, like that, and then just keep in mind that we are going to add at least this much more information here. But for right here, you really need the message to be over here. Just trust me for the future, because we are going to add some stuff here. But what I want you to realize here is that, okay, this all has to do with formatting, okay? Declare an argument. All right. So make sure you write that down to know. If and when I want you to write something down about employing uniform language, I'll let you know. But right now, the part that we focused on here, again, is exclusively on reformatting, not rewriting. We could actually say reformatting, because a paragraph is a format. So we actually are reformatting an argument from paragraph forms into list-like forms. So that said, let's go ahead and continue to work through our arguments. This video is going to go through 3 arguments, so it might be a little bit longer in terms of other videos, but the point is to go ahead and get 3 videos done with respect to this lesson. So if you haven't done so yet, of course, I encourage you to reread the notes on employing on reformatting, right? And then try reformatting this one on your own, but in pencil, in case you make a mistake. Now, what I'm going to do to make this go by a little bit faster is I'm not going to do this in front of you, the rewrite, or the reformat, I should say. I'm going to pause the video, and you don't pause the video, but I'm going to pause the video, and then in a second or two, you're going to just see the answer, and I'm going to talk to you about the answer. Oh, actually, you know what? I'm not going to pause the video, because I now remember that if I pause the video when using the software, sometimes that messes with the timing of the voice and what you see in the video. So never mind about that. Okay, so what we're going to do, of course, is we know that we have to do what? Look at your notes. We have to present each relevant statement, right, in a list-like format. Each statement get its own line, label the piece, premises with a P, conclusions with a C, and we know from our notes that we have to start with the premises and list all and any premises and then the conclusion, at least when it comes to simple arguments. All right, so we're going to do P1. You might want to, and remember, if you had to handwrite the arguments, what I recommended was that you put only one argument on each page and that you leave enough space to do the rewrite, the reformat, so I can see the reformat next to the paragraph version of the argument. So remember to write really small. I'm going to start way over here. Oh, and by the way, now I forgot to explain these titles to you earlier, but obviously you should know what it means to say, what I mean by saying original or ordinary arguments. Remember, ordinary arguments are those that we find in everyday life, editorials, social media, speaking with friends. They're often in paragraph form, reading, scientific reports, all kinds of things. Judges, when a judge issues a statement, and then the fully clarified version is the results we get when we, of course, apply all of the content principles and all of the reformatting principles. So in the future, you'll have to know what I mean when I say original or ordinary argument. You've got 10 examples from this lesson. And then when I say fully clarified or fully reformatted and clarified version of an ordinary argument, you have 10 examples from this document alone. So premise 1, the Center for Disease Control says that wearing a mask slows down the coronavirus. Okay. Then, oh, wait a minute. What did this say? Coronavirus or COVID-19? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and change that. I don't know why I did that. COVID-19, I believe, is the more technically correct name of the virus, so I'm going to use the more technically correct name of the virus. Okay, then we look for other statements. Okay, so the conclusion is next. So is it okay to put the conclusion next? You might want to check your notes. What do the notes say? The notes say no. It says list all and any premises first, at least in a simple argument, before the conclusion. So we have to keep going to see if there's any more premises. There is one more premise. So statement, what is that? 1, 2, 3. Statement 3 becomes premise 2. Check your formatting. Or do you have words underneath this label? If you do, then you have forgotten what I said in a previous demonstration. Say, right, there should be no words underneath the labels. Otherwise, you're just back in paragraph form. Okay, so the CDC. Okay, so here is something for uniform language that we'll write down. We're not going to use acronyms. We're going to use the full names because there are, for example, APA could mean American Philosophical Association. It could mean American Psychological Association. Don't assume necessarily that your reader or listener knows what is meant by your acronym. There are multiple organizations and words that have the same acronym. Therefore, when we're employing uniform language and trying to make the argument's logic crystal clear by, partially by reformatting and partially by wording, then we need to make sure that we're not using acronyms. So, acronyms, abbreviations, none of that. So what we're going to use then is what? We're going to change CDC to say all of this. So the Center for Disease Control is a reliable source when it comes to knowledge about, what does it say here? The virus. What's more precise? What's more clear? Of course, we know that, is there more than one virus that exists? Yes. So remember, we are trying to clarify an argument. The definition is, for clarified argument, is one in which the core essential logical features are made explicit. Can we make the reasoning from premise 1 and premise 2 to the conclusion more explicit by changing virus to something else? Yes. What virus are they talking about? We're not going to just say coronavirus. We're going to use the technical name already used in premise 1. So here we are employing content principle 3, employing uniform language. So instead of about the virus, we're going to say about what? COVID-19. Make sure you're putting periods, and make sure you put your periods at the end of your sentences and capitalize the first letter of your statements. Okay, now, are there any more premises? Don't leave out any premises. Nope. And then we've got the conclusion. So the conclusion is wearing a mask does slow it down. So wearing a mask does slow it down. Okay. So look at my conclusion. Is there an opportunity to employ uniform language? There is. What word do we need to replace with what word? What does the word it refer to? We don't know just looking at the conclusion. Again, we're trying to make the logic from the premises to the conclusion painfully explicit, super obvious. What word should we replace it with? Right. So what you need to do is you need to erase or cross out the word it here. In fact, erase it or completely cross it out so I can't see it. And then I want you to write in COVID-19. If you need to do like a little arrow upward like that and do COVID-19, that's perfectly fine. So that should be the correction that you make to that and that I should see in your submission. Look at how much more clear the notes are. So you don't need to underline. I'm just showing you here. So look here, I have, both of the premises say something about the Center for Disease Control. This one says something about the mask, right? And that it slows down COVID-19. This one isn't about the mask at all, but it is saying that it's a reliable what? Source when it comes to COVID-19. And of course, this source is making this claim about COVID-19. So then here we do have something about wearing masks, and we do see that where in the premises, right, wearing a mask does slow. And then down here, of course, we should have COVID-19. As you can see, there's nothing in the conclusion that is not somewhere in one of the premises. This argument is a very good argument because the premises adequately support the conclusion. Now, that doesn't mean that we think that the premises are necessarily true, right, or indisputable. But if we assume for a moment that the premises in this argument are true, then the conclusion necessarily follows. The logic is good, even if we don't agree. So an argument can be very good and can be valid, can be strong, can be persuasive, can be compelling, even if we disagree with a premise. Now, the best arguments will have a good logic. They will be strong or valid, but their premises will also be true or more likely to be true than not. Okay, so continue to remember that, guys. We are not right now really, I was evaluating the argument and saying that it's good, right? But that was just to make a point about, because I want you to remember that just because you don't agree with somebody's argument doesn't mean that it's not logical, doesn't mean it's not valid, doesn't mean it's not good from the standpoint of logic. And when I say good and valid, all I mean is that the premises either necessarily support the conclusion when we assume they're true, or the premises make the conclusion more likely than not when we assume the premises are true. All right, so now let's go on to argument 5. Okay, so argument 5, we're going to start with statement 2. So we're going to do premise 1. The Center for Disease Control. Notice that I forgot to capitalize the letters right here. If you make a little typo with punctuation in your original argument, one that you will clarify later, you can correct little teeny typos like that. What you cannot do is redo your argument, rewrite your argument, change your argument's content. The Center for Disease Control is what? Okay. Oh, actually, we need to add to our notes. Okay, so let's pause and let's add to our notes. Remember, I told you that we're going to divide the paper in half, so we're back to page 4. And I want to talk about, let's get into, here we're going to have stuff about employing uniform language. Okay. So as you saw here, we replaced that. I said that we have to replace the little it with what? Another word, COVID-19. And when we have the choice between, when we have the choice in terms of picking between 2 references for the virus, we chose the one that was more specific. So when in employing uniform language, we could have left virus in this statement from this one and replaced COVID-19 here with the word virus. But I said you should always pick the more precise noun. So let's write that down. Okay, so this is about employing uniform language. When employing, X means ing, by the way, sometimes. When employing, this is going to mean uniform language. Always choose the more exact, more precise word replacement. Okay. Also, convert any acronyms and to full names. Okay. Also convert any abbreviations, write small, to full words. Okay. Be on the lookout for words that like the following. As they need to be replaced with a more specific term, name. I might add to that. So examples are it. Okay, that's one example right now. We'll get to some more in a moment. Okay, so now let's go ahead and continue. So here we have the Center for Disease Control is what? Filled with quacks. Is filled with, okay, so now we've got an example of something from one of our other pages of notes, and that's a rhetorical element, okay? So to say quacks is very colorful language, and when we're doing rational discourse, we want to take out colorful language like quacks, because that's meant to have really more a psychological impact than a strictly logical one. So if you go to page 3, you should have about halfway down your notes, or maybe in the top half or top third, that rhetorical elements, that these are things that what? They're excess verbiage that we eliminate with a line draw through them, which is, we're not able to draw a line in this instance. So as you can see, why didn't we draw a line? So normally we would, or often we will, but not all the time. Here we cannot draw a line through this rhetorical language because then we get rid of the sentence with what? We make the sentence incomplete, okay? So sometimes there will be exceptions to the rules. What is going to happen here is even though this is colorful language and a rhetorical element in part, what we need to do is use uniform language, but we can't cross it out or we destroy the sentence. So we just need to know that we need to replace quacks with something else. We want to take out that because it has no role and is trying to go beyond what should be strictly rational discourse. So maybe what they mean by quacks is that they are not qualified or they are not good experts. What do you think? Instead of saying quacks, they could say that they are not reliable experts. They aren't reliable when it comes to knowledge. So we could say adequately trained. How about we say that? The Center for Disease Control is filled with people who are not, let's just say qualified. Qualified who are not qualified. Okay, that's better. We've taken out the rhetorical element and replaced it with not qualified. We could also say the Center for Disease Control is filled with unqualified people, right? So that would keep more kind of the sentence structure, but this is okay. So then premise 2 is next. What does it say? Quacks aren't reliable when it comes to knowledge. So what did we replace quacks with? We're going to use the same syntax since I went ahead and used this version here. People who are not qualified are not reliable when it comes to knowledge. Now, I could fill that out a little bit more what I think the speaker is saying, but then I think I'm doing too much for the speaker. And I want to make sure that I show that the speaker is only doing so much. So it could be improved. We could add more detail, but then I have to assume too much on behalf of the speaker in terms of exactly the connections they're trying to make within a sentence and across the statement. So I'm not going to do that. Just enough to get rid of the colorful rhetorical elements. Conclusion. So the conclusion happens to come last. So in this example, we see that the ordering of the premises in the reformatted version is by coincidence the same as it is in the paragraph form, in the ordinary version of the argument. All right, so then we've got the conclusion, the CDC is unreliable. Okay, so am I done with this? Is this a good result? Is there anything else that is there something that maybe I missed that needs to be changed? I hope you said so. So what should this be? What does this need to be written out as? Okay, so if you did this, then you need to completely cross this out or erase it. And if you don't have room, you can just draw a little arrow down or a little bit up and then write out Center for Disease Control, employing uniform language. All right, so we're going to go to employing uniform language, okay? So here, we're going to write replace colorful, merely rhetorical words and phrases that comprise premises or statements with ordinary words. Colorful, merely rhetorical words. Same thing. Also replace, I forgot to tell you guys this, slang. Okay. So if I say, oh, I don't have any bling, what I should say is, oh, I don't have any money. Okay, so let's go ahead and go to the last argument for this video. Okay, so here we have an ordinary argument, the original argument. We have visually demonstrated content principles 1 and 2 of clarifying the argument. Now we are here reformatting and applying content principle 3 as we do so. Oh, by the way, I forgot to tell you guys, when I have you do argument clarification, so argument markup and reformatting, 90 to 80% of your points is for this part. The final result will be worth 10 to 20 points because I want to see how you got to the final result, kind of like in math. Yeah, my grandson is staring at me. Sorry, I couldn't resist saying that. Okay, so premise 1. Okay, so I had no idea you were like that. Wow, okay, so this is cool. Let me express some intellectual humility. So I realize that I forgot to cross out something that is kind of merely contextual. We should have crossed out, or I should have crossed this out already. This is why it never hurts to take a second or third look at your argument work before you submit it. So this is just stating, an unawareness, an aspect of ignorance that someone had about somebody that they're speaking or arguing with. But this has nothing to do with supporting the conclusion that actually is way down here after the discount, right? So this has no logical role to play. It's just kind of giving a little context about the person's belief system with respect to what he thought about some person. So next then we have a conclusion. But we know from our notes, our reformatting notes in the argument module, that we never start with a conclusion of any kind, even if we're dealing with a complex argument, much less a simple one. So we don't even get our first sentence or argument statement for the reformatting until halfway down this passage. So this says that in and of itself doesn't make it okay. All right, so what do they mean by this? That in and of itself. be careful. Sometimes you have to go back to something that you drew a line through as excess verbiage to find what something else is referring to make the logic more explicit. So in this case, we had to draw a line through an entire discount. So it's still correct to have done that. But to know what is meant by that in and of itself, we need to go to what was crossed out. I mean, what we drew a line through. And what is that? He says we may strongly disagree, right, on the matter of mask and slowing down the coronavirus. So that is what he's talking about right there. Some of you might be saying, well, why did we cross that out? Because when it has the word right here, while, and the way he positions this afterwards with that, this is a discount. These words are a discount because of the word while in front of it, and then he has this statement. Okay, so syntax, grammar, rhetorically wise, this is a discount that had to be crossed out. But this is still something that has to be replaced. So we're going to not put while. We can't put while, or we're just inserting the discount again. We need to say something like the fact that. Now this is no longer a discount. It's referencing something that is important, okay? The fact that we strongly disagree on the matter of wearing mask and slowing down okay, so here they never use the word COVID-19, so if you wanted to use coronavirus, you can. But in context, if you know there's a more specific word, go ahead and use it. So I'm going to do that because I know that COVID-19 is technically the more correct naming of that virus. Slowing down, sorry, it's a mistake. COVID-19 does not make it okay for you to attack my person, meaning myself, me, what I refer to as me or self, with derogatory language. Some of you might be saying, well, it's so long. Why do we have to write it? It's so long. Because, going back to the definition of a clarified argument, we're making the logical features of an argument's core super explicit. Sometimes that requires being exact, being precise with the information, the wording, to report what is actually being said, what is actually meant to be understood in the argument. Okay, so do we have any other premises anywhere in the argument? Nope. So we can go to our conclusion. So here's the conclusion. Uh-oh. I messed up because my grandson came in here. So this is actually the what, guys? This is the conclusion. Right? Okay. So just do this. You can just cross this out if you're following. I mean, really, you should have practiced, but let's say you made the mistake I did. Some of you were probably watching me the whole time and saying, why is she labeling that as a premise? Guys, I got distracted. Even I, your professor, can get distracted. My grandchild distracted me. So be careful. Maybe your child distracts you or a text distracts you. Fortunately, I caught it. If not, I'm sure somebody would have emailed me or written something in the comment box for the note submission. Okay, so let's pretend this isn't here, okay? Because I don't want to do this. Another thing you could do in this instance is you could put the P here, but then draw an arrow saying that this should be down here and draw an arrow saying this should be up here, okay? All right, so the premise is what? Humans have infinite worth and dignity. Okay, so premise one, there is no other premise. Humans have infinite worth and dignity. Okay. Sorry about that. But I'm expressing intellectual humility, also expressing just professional humility that I, as your teacher, made a mistake. And I did that because I got distracted. I have no other explanation. Okay. All right. So, remember that an argument can have any number of premises. It could have one or two. We've looked at examples so far that only have 2 premises, but remember that an argument can have 5, 6, 1,000 premises. As some of your own arguments that you constructed during a previous lesson or week might have more than 2. Also keep in mind that we're not really evaluating. That's not our focus. We're analyzing, clarifying, seeing the parts of the argument and how they hang together. In employing uniform language, we're looking also a little bit more at the content. Making that more obvious in linkage when we employ uniform language. But as a side note, I am going to say that this argument might have a compelling reason in support of the conclusion, but this reason right here does not adequately support this conclusion. More reasoning is needed to make explicit what the speaker has in mind between what is said here and what is said here. That said, that's an evaluation. We're not doing that right now, but I want to make sure that you understand there's a difference between first analyzing the argument, right? Using intellectual empathy to break down the argument, using our knowledge of the content, principles, and reformatting to see what the actual logic and structure of the argument is, intellectual empathy. That's different from then evaluating and saying, do we think the argument is good or bad? We cannot evaluate this argument till we're sure we know what the argument is. And doing this and this, right, helps us to see what the argument is, to see how that person gets from their reason to their conclusion. Of course, we might say, hey, I don't see how you get from that premise to that conclusion. I need more from you. I'm not yet convinced. Therefore, you would need, if this was your argument, you would need to do a better job tying premise 1 to the conclusion by giving more premises that show that. But again, I do want to stress that this is all about intellectual empathy and breaking down an argument to show what its parts are so that we can see what the reasoning is and thereby see what concepts are being used and how they hang together from the premises to the conclusion. Only then are we in a position to evaluate and judge a given argument.